Today we are going to learn and practice how to start a mandala. We're going to start with the grid underneath of our design. It's not going to be a square grid, it's going to look more like a star with 8 sides. So we're going to start with a horizontal line in the very center of the paper, and then from the center of the paper again, we'll draw a vertical line. So a line going across and a line going up and down. From the center of our plus sign, draw 2 diagonal lines. I have the first one going from the bottom left to the top right, and then I'm drawing another one going from the bottom right to the top left. Notice how I tried my very best to make this even, so all of the angles that are on this star are about the same. I was drawing slowly and lightly in case I needed to erase any mistakes. At this point, I'm adding circles on top of the star grid that I started. Draw 5 or more circles. I'm going to draw 5. You can put them as big or as small as you want to. You can have them close together or spaced apart differently than I have them on mine. But please try to put at least 5 circles on your paper. I'm drawing very slowly because I'm trying to keep the circle even on my grid. It's okay if it's a little bit larger on top and smaller on the bottom. It's okay if it's a little bit of an oval. We're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to do this in a way that is relaxing and helps us focus and meditate on the practice of drawing. After you have your grid, which kind of looks like a spider's web, you can start adding in some petal designs and shapes. I drew 2 note cards with lots of different ideas that you can choose from, or if you have your own ideas, you are very, very welcome to use your own ideas instead of mine. My ideas are just a jumping off point, something to inspire you so that you can come up with your own ideas. I have lines and shapes and decorative lines and patterns that you can add to some of the smaller bands that you have on your design. Mandalas always start from the very center. So I'm starting with a circle in the very center of my star, made a very small circle. I chose to add a teardrop shaped petal in the center, and I'm putting it inside of the pizza slice shapes that I drew. You can put them inside of the shapes, or you could put your designs on top of the lines that you drew. If you had a different idea for your first design, use your idea. You don't have to copy the things that I'm doing. Next, I'm moving on to the outer circle. So I'm growing my mandala from the center outward. I'm marking points on the circle that would be in between the lines because that is where I want to start my next petal shape. I'm drawing a pointed petal. You can choose a pointed petal or any other kind of petal that you want. This time, instead of drawing inside the shapes, I'm drawing along the line. So my petal starts in between the shape, and then I draw the petal to the top of the line. I made a small mistake on one of my petals, so in order to fix it, I'm crafting a new line within my petal shape so that everything looks about even and everything looks about the same. So if you make small mistakes, think about how you can correct it and have the other petals look like that one. If your mandala is looking a little bit empty, you can add more designs or you can color it in. You can choose your own petal designs, or you can see what I'm doing and use my drawing as inspiration. At this point, I've decided to change up my design. I'm not adding a petal right away. I'm going to add a decorative pattern. So I'm going to add some circles. It's going to kind of look like pearls along the circle because they're all in a chain. They're all in a line. And this will help me make sure that all my circles are the same size. Sometimes if you draw the same shape over and over again, it'll change size. It might get smaller or larger. So I spaced out the circles to begin with, just to make sure that they're all the same size around the entire circle. If you wanted to add another petal design instead of adding a decorative pattern, that's fine. This is your mandala, and you can do what you want with it. You can look at the petals that I created for inspiration, or you can create your own type of petal. You can see here that I'm making a mark. I'm drawing a little point in the middle of the line of the circle, and that's where the petal point is going to stop, so that all of the petals look about the same size. And at this point, I've made a small mistake on my petal. One thing I could have done to correct that was turn my paper so that I had an easier time moving my hand. So I will come back to that petal later and add a little bit of a correction to it. Instead of being frustrated, I was thinking about how I could fix it later, and I continued on with my other petals. I'm adding a curved line inside my petals to make it look like the petal under petals with decoration, just to add a little extra design to it. And then I can also color in part of the petal, which will help cover up part of the mistake that I made. So I'm using a pen, which means that if I make any mistakes, I can't erase them. I have to think about what I can add to my design to kind of cover up my mistake. I'm adding some lines on the outside of the petals because I'm trying to make the mistake I made with that first line look like it was intentional. So I'm turning that mistake line into a pattern that I'm creating on my own. So if you make a mistake on your design and you can't erase it, make a plan on how you can turn that mistake line into an intentional line on the rest of your petals. When I was first drawing my circles, I made a very small space, so I'm going to add a pattern inside of it. So I was looking at the patterns on the right side for inspiration. I decided to go with some spirals because I don't really have that design in my pattern yet. I added some thin and thick lines to show a little bit of variation of line. That adds some interest, and the person who's looking at the mandala, or even you as you're working on it, will be a little more interested in looking at this for more time. This section is the last part that I'm going to work on, but if you have more time and you want to grow your mandala to the far edges of the paper, then I encourage you to keep working on it. So I am drawing some teardrop shaped petals on the lines that I drew underneath. And as I was drawing them, you can see that they're getting a little bit bigger each time. So I have to do a little bit of problem solving to make them all look even and all look about the same size. So I'm adding more layers, and now these petals are starting to look a little more like onions. And that's all right. So as long as I have them all around the edge, they're still going to look even. You can choose whatever kind of petals you want to work with. You do not have to copy exactly what I'm doing. If you don't like this shape, you can choose another one, or you can find one from your imagination, or maybe you can look up some mandalas on the internet and choose some shapes from other artists. In between these onion shapes that I drew, I'm going to create another kind of shape. So I want to fill up that space. I'm looking at the petals that I have on the left side of my paper. And I'm drawing one that I haven't put in my design yet. After I filled in those petal shapes, I noticed that they look a little bit too boring and they don't fit in well with the design. So I'm adding some more lines inside of the petal shapes to add a little more interest and to fill it in a little more with the color. And that way it will work a little bit better with the design that I have. It's not going to look empty.